Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Boy, do I have an interesting video for you today. I just got off a Zoom call with somebody who blew my mind with respect to the theory that they put forth about what is going on in Ukraine. I have not heard this theory anywhere else before, and I'm sure that most of you haven't also. Maybe some of you have. But this was very, very compelling to me because it explains a lot about what is going on in Ukraine right now. So you got to stick with me. And if you want more information on this, stay tuned this Saturday because we're going to have a special guest on. And he's probably going to blow people's minds about a lot of fundamental beliefs that they just got wrong about nuclear war, about this war, and everything in between. So you are not going to want to miss this one. Okay, so why is it that Russia doesn't appear to be using all its new equipment? It's Su-57 fighter planes. It's better missile defense systems. It's better tanks. It's more newer, modern tanks. Why isn't it using all its good stuff? Here's his theory. His theory is that Russia expects that the conflict is going to escalate and escalate broadly into the Eastern European theater. And when it does so, Russia is going to need those resources at that time when this thing escalates, okay? This is why Belarus is posturing. This is why Poland is posturing with the whole peacekeeping rub, which is really a guise for getting NATO more directly involved in pulling the US into the war. But he also told me something else. He said that, Russia right now is using Ukraine as a training ground. Okay, so they're seeing what works and what doesn't. Because remember, they have a bit of experience in Chechnya and Georgia and Ukraine as well for a extended period of time, Crimea, but not in any full-scale, large war sense. And how do you create soldiers? I'm talking about real soldiers. I'm not talking about conscripts and people who've never seen battle. How do you create soldiers? You put them in war. Ukraine right now is a Darwinian free-for-all. It's natural selection at its finest. Who's going to survive and who is not? You take 10,000 guys, the 1,000 who come out, it doesn't matter how many you lose in the meat grinder, according to them, of course. You get 1,000 soldiers that come out on the other end. One of those seasoned vets in urban warfare is worth like 10 guys, easily. A guy who's run through the gamut of a war like this and has kept it together psychologically is worth a lot to the Russians. And this is a country who historically has had no problem throwing life at the problem. Okay, we've seen that in the gulags. We've seen that in the what is it called? The road to ruins. I can't remember what it is, but it's a road that was the construction of which cost Russia millions of lives. Russia has no problem exchanging 10,000 guys for 1,000 soldiers. That's what they're doing. They're training them for a bigger war that's probably going to happen because it almost has to happen now. And it would appear that they're reserving their best equipment and maybe even a lot of their best soldiers, for all we know, for that fight, which is bound to ensue. And this is why NATO is scrambling. Okay, we've seen Russia just recently bust out a hypersonic missile, which was clearly to send a message. Okay, that hypersonic missile skirted across Ukraine. Probably either it was undetected, even if it was detected, you wouldn't be able to shoot it down. And it targeted a military base close to the border of Poland, and it took out a lot of guys. Okay, and it took out a lot of equipment as well. And this was to send a message that, look, if we want, we can wipe out all of your missile defense systems that won't really do a whole heck of a lot anyways. They're only good in theory and they're easily overwhelmed. We'll take out all your missile defense systems, your THAAD systems, your the systems that the UK just took out or just sent to, I can't remember if it was Slovenia. It was one of those countries anyways. We'll take them out. And, that we have these weapons. But what they're also trying to do, this is the crux of his theory, is that they're trying to appear weak. They're trying to, and I know this kind of contradicts what I just said about the hypersonic missiles, but this is, that was kind of my own twist on the theory. And my theory might be wrong. He thinks that they're trying to appear very weak to bait NATO into a greater war, a greater conflict. The motive for which, the incentive for which, I'll let him explain that on Saturday. But his theory is that Russia is trying to appear very weak so that NATO will start to dump resources into the fight. And in doing so, expose all their weaknesses so that Russia can then, obviously exploit those weaknesses. And in what it is right now, it's like a troop factory for Russia, okay? They got hundreds of thousands, millions of soldiers in reserves if they needed to. And they're just going to keep sending guys in, and what's going to come out the other side? There's going to be a lot of death and destruction, but the guys who come out on the other side, like I said, they're going to be soldiers, hardened, toughened soldiers, just like these Chechenian guys who are fighting there right now, who have the experience. Okay, they just know their way around an urban combat situation. And yeah, savages for sure, committed probably a lot of heinous war crimes for sure, but it is what it is. And the Ukrainians also, who've been fighting in the Donbass, have years and years of experience in urban warfare. And they also know the Russian way of war well. So maybe NATO is going to end up underestimating Russian capabilities, get pulled into this, and realize, like those guys did with that hypersonic missile, that, oh, this is what modern warfare was about. This is what happens when you don't have full spectrum superiority over the battlefield like we're accustomed to when we project our power over these small and relatively defenseless countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, in which we eventually get booted out of there too anyways, because the insurgency and the nationalist fervor and religious beliefs of the people is just simply too strong for us to ever overcome. Is Russia toying with NATO with this war? People will say, oh no, they're losing guys, they're running out of ammo, their supply. You can't believe anything we're hearing. I'm not saying that there's not some truth to it. I'm just saying that we don't know what's really going on. And what we do know is that if they wanted to, they could have leveled Kiev by now. They haven't. Now, I've been floating around another theory with that too. And this is kind of, okay, you ready to put your tinfoil hats on for this one? This is a big one. Put your tinfoil hats on. You're going to need it. And I really don't think that this is true, by the way. This is just something that I can't quite figure out. I can't quite figure out why they've spared Kiev. My only thing that I can think about is that maybe, just maybe, Zelensky made some kind of deal with Putin and said, look, can you get rid of these Nazi guys in southern Ukraine? If you just get rid of them for me, then maybe we can strike some kind of deal, because think about it. I mean, the Russians got guys everywhere in Kiev. I mean, they're just probably, like teeming with moles and spies everywhere. They know where he is. So, I mean, if he's even there, I'm pretty sure the Russians would maybe play on that if he wasn't there, or say he wasn't there, or push that narrative if he truly wasn't. Which is why I think he probably is there, but you never know. But nobody's really thought of that idea either, that maybe they're in cahoots to purge, because remember, Zelensky's Jewish, right? So maybe they want to get rid of the Azov, but they know that it's just too strong in the country. So they couldn't do it themselves. They needed the Russians to help them do it. But then that doesn't explain all the NATO stuff. And so I don't know. Anyways, that's just an aside. Who really knows, right? But we do know that Russia is reserving their best assets for something. We know that the nuclear threat is ratcheting up. A lot of people have been saying, oh, you said that there was going to be a nuclear war 2 weeks ago. No, I didn't. I never said that there was going to be a nuclear war 2 weeks ago. I said that the risk of a nuclear war had went from like zero almost a few months ago. Well, I shouldn't say zero, but pretty damn close, to very, very high. So high that high-ranking generals the world over have cautioned that this is worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, all of the conditions that need to be in place for the elevated threat to go to DEFCON 2 or DEFCON 2 are in place. And this is evidenced in the moves that are being made. You have the strike group, which has moved into the Mediterranean. You have France deploying 3 nuclear submarines with 16 Trident missiles on each. Not Trident missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles on each. And nuclear tipped, of course. Because they can see things ratcheting up. You have the president of Belarus threatening nuclear war, because Belarus will host Russia's nuclear weapons if they don't have them already, against Poland if they pursue this peacekeeping mission. Okay, in let's check my time here. In Western Ukraine, Poland has proposed, because Poland, it's almost like Poland knows that this thing is going to expand beyond Ukraine borders, and they want to get the jump on things, and they want to make sure that NATO is on their side, because they remember history and they remember being basically left for dead by, what it wasn't called NATO at the time. I can't remember what it was called. Was it the League of Nations or something like that? And I don't even know if they were in that, but they remember that none of the allies came to their help when Russia and Germany invaded at the same time. And so I think they're really worried. They're really paranoid that this could happen. And this is why they're buying all these weapons. And so when we say that the threat of nuclear war is escalating, we mean that every day that goes by, every single day, the amount of news that I don't share with you guys is, I could just make videos all day, but I just try to cram it all into one because I don't have the time. We're still busy filling back orders for nuclear survival gear. And, the thing with that is that you don't want to wait, obviously, until things get to DEFCON 1 to start scrambling and preparing. You want to do this now. Okay, I'm going to be releasing a video probably tomorrow about, who's going to die first. But we'll save that for tomorrow. This is a very, very compelling theory because I hadn't thought of this before. That, Russia's using it as a training ground to train super soldiers that they're going to use in a war in a broader Europe if it comes to that. Because remember, what's going to happen? Like this idea that Russia would settle on some sort of agreement just for the easternmost regions, like the Donbass and maybe Mariupol, and I know I'm not pronouncing it right, and parts of the south in Ukraine, and that's going to be it, and they're going to just walk away. I can never see that happening, because this whole demilitarization thing, especially now with the push to arm the Ukrainians, I can never see them, sleeping well, knowing that they were going to continuously be armed up, because they know that the fight would eventually come back. So you really have to take all of Ukraine. Like there really is no choice. And in order to take all of Ukraine, then you kind of have to make sure that Ukraine is not being, fed by the 4 countries that border it, which means that, well, now you have to, encroach into their neck of the woods. And in doing so, the closer and closer you get to that western border, the greater the likelihood that things flare up. So Russia is preparing for the long game. They're preparing for a much bigger conflict in which you're going to see, like right now they're fighting a war against insurgents who are significantly ill-equipped. They're still pretty well equipped. They have the Stingers and the Javelins and the yada yada yada. But in terms of what Russia can bring in terms of manpower and weapons, they're overwhelmed. But when up against the bigger guns in NATO, and they've war gamed this many times, NATO has and the US has, and most times when there's been a war game that simulates what would happen if Russia went to war with NATO, the Russians win. Because right now they're not using the big weapons. I mean, they're using some thermobaric weapons, but they're not using all the big guns. They're not using their new equipment. And it makes you wonder if they're preparing for something big. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, stay tuned, because this Saturday we're going to have that special guest on, and he's going to talk about this theory in more detail. Go and check out the video we released today with the doctors over at Harvard and what's the other one, Mayo Clinic and Yale and Columbia University, and all these doctors who've put together this excellent service for preppers. Go check it out. It's the video I released before this one. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe.